Good afternoon, everyone. A big part of my job is to hold off productive and fun conversation for another productive and fun conversation. So, first and foremost, thank you all for coming. This is Making Measurement Matter, and we are here with a fantastic panel to talk about something that obviously matters because you all are here, and we're going to unpack that. So the goal of the discussion is really to just understand what is coming, what is happening today, and how we can make it really meaningful for the people in the room. I'm going to open up with just some logistics and housekeeping, speak a couple of words about how ReFed is thinking about measurement, and then pass it off to our wonderful panel to introduce themselves. So first, please mute your phones if you haven't already. We will be recording this session, so no need to record a video. We are going to send out links to all of the sessions to you all. As far as next steps there, I think we're all good to start. So the real two topics, because measurement is such a broad topic, the two things that we're thinking about are how is food waste represented in the broader ESG reporting landscape, and how to reframe the required reporting that is often associated with time-consuming work or kind of really complicated legal and tax documents and audits and whatnot into something that is kind of really meaningful to those who are reducing food waste and doing the work. So a couple of opening thoughts and that kind of resonate with what we heard from Dana earlier. We did a study earlier, actually my colleague Jalen Nod behind here, published some research on 75 leading companies across food service, retail, and manufacturing on this very question of measurement and reporting. And what we found is that about 73% of leading companies acknowledge food loss and waste as a distinct topic, but when you dig further into whether or not they have quantitative, time-bound reporting, only 37% are doing so. So a part of the discussion today is why is that, and how can we increase that number of having folks commit to reducing food loss and waste? And why does ReFed care? Well, ReFed obviously cares for multiple reasons. From our end, it can, on the business services and business initiative side, it is on the industry level via the US Food Waste Pact. We collect data from businesses directly, and we also do so on behalf of one-on-one engagements to accelerate the adoption of food waste solutions. So with those intros aside, I'd love to open it up to our wonderful panel that actually covers every lane of the topic today, from those that are setting the standards for reporting disclosure frameworks, to those reporting it, and those transforming and kind of providing the infrastructure for actionable reporting. So we'll start off with Ethan on my left.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Ethan Soloviev. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at HowGood. I'm also owner of a small-scale farm in upstate New York. So I was just planting my corn, harvesting asparagus, and keeping my hands actually dirty and connected to the base of production while managing at HowGood the largest database in the world of food product and ingredient impacts. So we go all the way to end results, end outcome impacts on carbon, water, biodiversity, labor risk, animal welfare, waste, soil health, land occupation, and bring it into one whole system that has about 30,000 ingredients and has tracked the final impact of about 4.5 million products out in the ecosystem. Really looking forward today to bringing some of the perspective on data and bringing data into action for companies of all scales and seeing what we can do together to be exchanging, flowing data, and moving in the direction that we want to here.
Thank you.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Priscilla Autry, and I am the Global Head of Circularity and Waste Reduction at Amazon. And my team and I, we work with all the different Amazon businesses. You can think about Whole Foods, the retail operations, .com when you order online, AWS data centers, and every type of business Amazon is involved in. We proudly have committed to publicly to halve our food waste by 2030 across our US and our EU operations. My team works on providing the data infrastructure architecture to track that and to provide the performance indicators for our businesses that are actually executing these. And so we also work with our different business partners within the businesses that are executing to find solutions, to drive action, and to make progress happen. So I'm excited to be here to talk about the business side of things and how we look for actionable data and measurement frameworks to drive progress.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Janine Gillian. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a very proud ReFed board member. And in my prior life, I was CEO of the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which set and still does set industry-based disclosures for reporting sustainability performance primarily to investors and other capital markets participants. I was very involved in the global effort to create the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, and we merged SASB into the ISSB. So I'm here to talk about a standard setting perspective. I also currently serve on the board of the Capitals Coalition, which is very focused on impact accounting and continuing to advance the practice of impact accounting in terms of how can you quantify both positive and negative externalities and present alternative balance sheets and P&Ls that take into account the impacts, quantified impacts.
Thank you. Well, Janine, let's start with you. So given your leadership in setting the standards, we thought it would be good to start with an overview of the landscape of the reporting landscape.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things any of us here when we talk about standards is the alphabet soup and confusion about so many proliferating standards. And what I find really helpful is to actually think about it as a framework, because many of the things when people talk about the alphabet soup are things that are created for different purposes, targeted to different audiences. So this is the organizing framework that I use to just try and slot things into their purpose and their audience. And I really start at the most foundational level. So at the most foundational level, there are operating measures. What are measurement? And there are tools for measurement to measure specific activities. And a good example of this is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is really designed to measure greenhouse gas emissions. That then is used in multiple frameworks for multiple purposes. Next level up are disclosure standards. These are usually standards that are focused on guiding external disclosures. Could be to different constituencies. So you've got something like the SASB and the ISSB that are focused on disclosing to investors, other capital markets participants. You have something like GRI that is focused on disclosing to multiple stakeholders. And then you have a whole slew of regulatory disclosure standards coming in. Then on top of that, you have data aggregators. Data aggregators are people who take all of the publicly disclosed information and increasingly not necessarily publicly disclosed, but sourced from things like AI. And data aggregators then aggregate all that data and sell it to users of the data, often investors, portfolio managers, investment management firms. And then at the highest level, I think about people who provide some sort of evaluation of performance using that publicly available data. And those will be, and sometimes they provide a certification, sometimes they provide a score, an ESG score. Usually, to varying degrees, they're actually validating data, but that is the whole world of certification and assessments. And that's where something like a B Corp score, an MSCI ESG score, live in this certification and assessment layer. So whenever I hear a new acronym, I try I try to figure out what is its purpose, who is it targeted at, and how does it fit within this broad organizing framework. What makes it somewhat confusing is that there are people who play multiple roles. So if you think about something like CDP, aggregates carbon disclosure data and then also gives companies a performance score. So it's not totally clean, but it helps you figure out what a new framework organization is trying to accomplish.
Thank you. So before we go into kind of each of you, the roles that you all play in this landscape, I kind of want to get a quick pulse in the room. How many of you, raise your hand, are you reporting food loss and waste data to an external body? Raise your hand. And now, how many of you are those receiving data that is being reported externally? Okay, so we got a pretty fair representation of both folks in the room. So with that said, why don't we start off, Ethan, kind of with your role in this landscape. Tell us a bit about the data you receive and how you make it meaningful for the audience that you engage with.
So I really appreciate Janine, setting the stage. And a lot of times when we're talking about measurement, we're looking at this whole company level, right? The standards are really set at how do I look at and assess a full company? And that's amazing. It's really useful, especially for investors, for capital allocation, to be able to distinguish between companies on that whole level. Inside a company, when we work with major retailers like Amazon, like Ahold Delhaize, or major brands like Danone or Nestle or Ferrero, a lot of their day-to-day decisions are not so much driven by the corporate level reporting on sustainability, but companies are actually all made up of products. Like, products are the bricks with which the building of a company is made. And in order to make intelligent decisions to head towards a lower carbon future, to increase livelihoods, to enhance biodiversity, we're finding that companies need detailed data on the individual product level. Ideally, that product level, if you add up, one of our retailers might have 500,000 products, 500,000 SKUs that they sell. So if you roll up the impact, the carbon, the water, the labor risk of each individual product, multiply it by how many are bought or sold in the year, then you get a sort of full picture of the impact of the company, which should then relate to these higher level standards and reporting and the aggregate numbers that go to CDP or that you report according to GHG Protocol or one of the other approaches. So the consilience between that high level overview, but then the operational capability of the individual products of actually making change, that is the key, and that's what we're unlocking from the bottom up. We've had, thanks to Janine and others, corporate level reporting standards and a bit of a sense of it for a while now, at least a few decades. We have lacked that granular individual product, individual decision making from the ground up, especially in the food system, until really the last couple of years we can do it at scale. And I think that that's going to begin to give us a lot more granularity, a lot more detail, a lot more innovation capability to make motion on particular goals, whether that's food loss or waste, or which is sort of a process indicator. This is the last little point I'll make. Food loss and waste is interesting, but it's sort of a midpoint process indicator. It has impacts in carbon, in water, in biodiversity, and land occupation. So it's an interesting one that hits many of them, but in order to make motion on any of those outcomes, we really need to get to the detailed product level and then connect that up to the whole corporate level.
Yeah, Priscilla, I'm sure you're working on multiple levels there, but there are obviously challenges to getting to that level of detail while meeting all the needs of reporting that you have. And obviously with the platforms like How Good that are out there, those challenges are addressed. Can you walk us through how you're reporting food loss and waste data and how what Ethan shared resonates with your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. The food loss and waste protocol has been a helpful framing for how we track and measure internally. And some of the points that Ethan made, which is being able to have and leverage the product level information, has been very instrumental and helpful for us because our businesses already track those, right? They need to be able to track inventory and know how much we're selling, how much we need to order back in, and inventory health. And so looking at those business-specific KPIs that they already have to track that they care about, and finding ways to then intersect what we need to assess what is bleeding out, if I should call it that, and being lost, is how we kind of position our measurement. And so when we look at one of the KPIs, like shrink, businesses care about shrink, the operators care about shrink, and so they measure it. And so how do we then plug that in and help them understand that that KPI and reducing that KPI also helps reduce food waste and loss, and then connect that. So that's one tangible example of how we use those business-specific KPIs to translate to the outcome that we need. We still have to work on educating leaders, decision makers on what the KPIs or the reporting requirements are for food. But it's very important for us to ensure that we're not complicating it. They don't need to know every nuance of the different reporting requirements. We give them the high-level overview, and then we find ways to make it actionable. What is controllable by a warehouse associate or a store associate that is making those quality decisions on what is no longer able to be sold, and then what are the KPIs we can give them on donations, efficiency, things of that nature that is very close to the activities they are doing that then influence the outcome of food. And so most of the time we're looking at that and seeing how we can translate those input actions to those output regulatory reporting requirements or voluntary reporting requirements. And then to answer your questions, yes, whether through our voluntary disclosure and our sustainability reports where we share progress on the goals we've taken, we also report to different bodies like REFED, and then in Europe we report to RAP to partner and make sure that we're on track to some of the goals and holding ourselves accountable as well.
Janine, thank you, Priscilla. Having heard what Priscilla and Ethan shared, and after having experience in learning about how the dots are connected between the data that is being reported to external reporting disclosures to how it's being used for a business, I'm sure you've thought about every single angle of how to keep it simple and actionable. Tell us a bit more about how those standards are set.
Yeah, so I think what I find so interesting listening to Priscilla is that when we were originally developing the SASB standards, the real goal was to not to have to invent new measures, but to have relevant industry-specific measures that were already being used in the business, and then begin to disclose that information externally. And the whole rationale for that was to be as cost-effective as possible in order to use measures that were already being used for internal decision-making. And that would be the perfect world, right? You have internal decision-making and external reporting completely aligned. It's very interesting talking to Priscilla about that because of the concept that the internal measures aren't always completely relevant for what you're trying to disclose externally, and there needs to be this internal translation mechanism, which is what Priscilla's team does. So I think that's just something we need to continue to learn about as we think about how to set disclosure standards, is in what cases is an internal operational metric relevant for external disclosure versus when does it need this translation mechanism? And I think that translation mechanism is often turning things into dollars and cents, really. It's really taking, right? It's taking a process metric, and I love what you said, Ethan, about it's taking a process metric and then turning that into the dollar impact of that ultimately on financial performance, and that's when you get your relevant external disclosure.
And I'll just jump in on that. So usually I'm kind of down on process metrics and I like the outcome metrics, but to the point you just made, food loss and waste is a really good one because it links directly to dollars and cents because of what you said about inventory and shrinkage, and waste in the food actually means, waste in product that could have been sold. So in that way, it actually has an advantage. It's harder to get the cost of carbon or the cost of biodiversity into the balance sheet inside any company's work. There's a lot of people working to do that. We're getting better and better. Product level detail is helpful for it. But the food loss and waste part actually translates directly. And so it has a little more power, maybe even than I realized, in seeing it in that light.
Well, given the ease of translation to the business case, right, there's still, I think, a gap to be explored a bit, particularly because food loss and waste reporting has been around for quite a bit, but there's room to mature and have it be more refined. And in doing so, obviously, there are challenges. So I'd love to talk about those challenges that you faced, how you've overcome them, and from any perspective. And then once we covered that, we'll go into what to expect in the future as far as reporting. So maybe kind of, Ethan, you were sharing just a bit more about how the business case makes sense, but in trying to translate food loss and waste to other external reporting metrics, I'm sure there are challenges you've seen either customers of How Good overcome or just ways that you're anticipating the reduction of friction between business KPIs to external frameworks. Tell us a bit about the challenges you've seen and how you've helped folks overcome them.
Okay, so the main challenges are gathering the data and the diversity of data gathering and management systems that are out there. We have to go beyond just each company saying, well, this is how I'm going to do it. And some of the things that you mentioned have helped to bring and harmonize the data in the same way that some of the standards internationally are beginning to harmonize. We have the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO coming together, which is really important for everybody's reporting sanity. But I think we haven't actually seen significant progress in terms of data that flows up and out of companies. Companies tend to have their own systems that they're using, and when we interact with the company, we get some of that data, and we can calculate, okay, what's the carbon impact, what's the water impact, what do you do about it? But in terms of interplay and transfer of that data amongst companies, especially in the supply system, from a farm to an ingredient supplier to a manufacturer to a retailer, we do not have good systems set up yet to do that on food loss and waste. We now have a better sense of that for carbon, so maybe this is some of how those challenges have been overcome that I can see perhaps leading towards food loss and waste, is in carbon there's a new standard that's called PACT, which is put out by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and it provides it's a transfer standard that talks about how do you pass information from one actor in a supply system to another. So it's not like the GHG Protocol, which tells you how to measure. It's more like when I'm giving you information, if I'm your supplier and I'm giving it to you, what format does it need to go in? So for carbon, there's now a open, API-first, digitally, very, very fast way that any company in the world can share their product carbon footprint data for any individual product or material and then pass it along quickly with all the metadata associated with it so that decisions can be made in the supply system. So that companies can say, I'm going to do a tender process, I'm going to go out to RFP for a new set of ingredients or materials, and I want to include, in this case I'm talking about carbon, but we could do this, we could say, I want to include what is your food loss and waste impact metrics, and I'm going to make a decision for the person who's got the supplier that has the lowest impact on food loss and waste. We're beginning to be able to do that with carbon now, which is very exciting, and I think that's one direction of interoperability and transferring the data through the supply system that would be very, very useful, but we haven't seen as much of happening yet.
So there's lessons to be learned from other reporting disclosures that could be applied to food loss and waste. And I think this is a good transition to Priscilla, your role, because this is a two-sided question. In your role, you're supporting the reporting of not just food loss and waste, but of several ESG reporting disclosures. So you have a unique perspective in what is kind of common amongst all reporting and what is unique to food loss and waste. So I'd love to explore that, and then also walk us through what the process of translating those KPIs to that matter to the business to reporting disclosures and vice versa.
Yeah, I'll answer that, but I'll just touch quickly on what Ethan said, that yes, there's a lot more we can do on just the whole value chain data transparency. At some level it's happening, your immediate upstream, you're able to exchange, and we do that a lot, right? Like when you're getting inventory that is already coming in, either expired or damaged, we're able to quickly transfer that information. But yes, cross supply chain visibility can be improved, and we should also be cautious on how we action that, learning from the product digital passport requirements and like how challenging that is. We need to just make sure that it's also realistic and, But to answer your question, David, for us, the way we think about it, like in the initial point that I was making, is to always decouple what is business actionable to drive progress and what we need to report. We know and understand that the reporting requirements help because it makes sure that our leaders also prioritize, they incentivize outside of wanting to do good for the environment. So it's very important. But we consistently ensure that we're separating the output, again, to the input actions at every level and who can action that. So when you think about when you go to a grocery store or a food-related operation, even during the inventory management, when somebody has to take something out, thinking about a tool for them to log that decision so that it can be actionable insight on this thing was damaged because of XYZ, and then having that data log available for us to be able to deep dive and then implement actionable efforts and initiatives to address is important. And so along the value chain and the different processes, being able to have very quick, easy tools to log decisions, to log the data. Depending on the type of product, if it has an ASIN, it's easy to scan and incorporate it in systems and tools internally, which we have some of that, to then be able to leverage the insights, but not all of them will be able to have that scan, like prepared food. And so still thinking through all of those challenges and complexities and making sure that the operator also to incentivize them to do that action, it's easy, it's accessible, and then it's available within the company to draw from and then take actions that would then impact food waste and loss. We will then take all of that, roll it up to show where we are, did we improve, did we not improve, what were the root causes, and what are we doing about them. So that's kind of a quick overview of how, on the execution side, we think through it and then we roll it up for reporting.
So there's a reduction of friction for those that are actually reporting the data on the ground and giving them the right level of visibility that they can act on as soon as possible. But I do want to double click on that first part of the question of, you have a unique view on food loss and waste reporting. Are there things that stand out, just that, like, I know we didn't prepare this question, hopefully this isn't putting it on the spot, but that stand out for food loss and waste in particular that is unique to that you don't necessarily see in other ESG reporting?
That's a good question. Well, not necessarily. When we look at things like setting boundaries, what is within a reporting scope, what is considered direct, indirect, those concepts translate very well. And to Ethan's point, is direct, is tangible food waste and loss. So unlike carbon, where we have to align on emission factors and science methodologies, it's not as complicated here. I believe that the way it's set up and the way we are tracking it, it's very, relative to the other things that we have to measure, like biodiversity loss, it's much more simpler and accessible. And there are unifying concepts like the boundary setting, what is in scope, what is out of scope. Those are very similar for food waste and loss reporting.
Thank you. So after having heard how the measurement and reporting process is operationalized, Janine, as far as like looking ahead and the future of reporting, I know we were hoping to sequester the things coming up at the end, but just informing what's coming up and having those discussions, what do you anticipate for those in the room that are doing food loss and waste measurement as things to expect?
Yeah, so I think about thinking about what's on the external reporting landscape first. I'm really happy, Ethan, that you mentioned the Greenhouse Gas Protocol ISO partnership. That is really important, and it really is focused exactly on product carbon footprints and really continuing to push the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and to be able to do product carbon footprints, which for all the reasons Ethan said is really a critical missing piece of infrastructure right now. It's also really, really important as more carbon border adjustment mechanisms come in around the world. It's actually essential to having all of that, those processes work. So definitely keep your eye on what's going on with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO partnership. Then there are what I always call the big three external reporting mechanisms happening right now. California, greenhouse gas reporting coming online for a very wide population of companies. The EU, to choose your acronym, CSRD or ESRS, but the European Sustainable Reporting Standards just went through a major revision at the EU level. Definitely that is impacting a lot of companies, though they revised the scope down so it captures far fewer companies than it originally did. And then the third piece, which I continue to really encourage people in the U.S. to follow, is the ISSB. Even though the ISSB standards don't directly apply in the U.S., the ISSB has significant traction globally. They're now forecasting 50 jurisdictions to have adopted the ISSB standards, and that will have big impact on multinationals as all of the different subsidiaries were operating in different countries start using the ISSB standards. What I am really hoping to see is that widespread adoption of the ISSB globally starts driving continued convergence in the external reporting landscape. And I really do think for most U.S. multinationals, it makes a lot of sense to start thinking about ISSB reporting as a foundational baseline. I do want to encourage everyone to continue to follow what's going on with the SASB standards at the ISSB. They continue to enhance and maintain the SASB standards, and there is an open consultation right now on meat, poultry, and dairy and agricultural products. I think it would be fantastic for people to respond with more insight about food waste measurement to those consultations. That consultation closes July 24th, so would be great to have more of you respond to that. And then there's another consultation underway, an organization called the Energy and Environment Alliance, which is a UK-based organization looking at sustainability in hospitality industry, has an open consultation on potential industry-based standards with food loss and waste. So I think continuing to really encourage all of the standard setters operating through an industry lens to refine the food loss and waste measurement requirements would really push forward progress, because to Priscilla's point, what gets externally reported gets attention and gets resources. So continuing to see food loss and waste positioned more significantly within all the external reporting frameworks, I think would be terrific.
So really emphasizing what Janine just shared, because we have folks in the room that are passionate about food loss and waste, that are reporting to external disclosures, that often talk to us as part of the U.S. Food Waste Pact or a one-on-one engagement and say, it's really challenging sometimes to be able to know, okay, how do I streamline reporting? Or at least not even just a little challenging, but it's just that added friction of, if I'm reporting to you, then that's one more alphabet soup that I need to report to. So in providing feedback to ISSB, you are using that opportunity to make the metrics externally reported more meaningful to you and to elevate food loss and waste. So it's really important that you as food businesses are engaging in that way. And I think, again, looking ahead, and I'd love to start with Ethan and open up to the rest of the panel before we go into kind of final closing words and Q&A. What does real radical transformation